I'm very excited to kick us off today and thankful for everyone who's been able to join us. My name is Michelle Caracappa. I'm the Chief Program Officer here at New Leaders, and I'm joined by 5 esteemed New Leaders alumni who are school leaders leading their schools across the country through this incredible school year, through the pandemic, through this national outcry for racial justice, and have really been, just doing phenomenal work in their school communities. And we brought them together today to really shine a light and bring some insight into what their experiences are, both the challenges and the opportunities that they are facing at the helm of their school communities. We're thrilled for you all to join us today. And I'm going to just provide a few slides with some very brief context setting on our work. And I'm going to then turn it over to our panelists to introduce themselves, and then we're going to get into a panel discussion. Again, if you're just joining us now, you're welcome to just drop into the chat your name, who you are, if there's anything you want us to know about you and what you're hoping to get out of today. But I will just say again that my hope is that this panel, this discussion will provide just that much more texture, insights into the real work that is happening in our school communities and the real, the true reality that our school leaders are facing every day as they work to serve their school communities in this year like none other that we've ever experienced. So brief overview of how we're going to spend the time, and I'm going to jump right into it. So just to set the stage, I'm not going to sort of read over everything that's on this slide, but one thing that I wanted to sort of start with is that certainly as this year has reinforced our society, as we know, is deeply inequitable economically, medically, and certainly educationally. And our schools both reflect that inequity, but they also can play a role in reinforcing it. And I think what is clear and even more clear to Americans really sort of experiencing the pandemic, living through this moment, seeing how things are playing out, is that our school systems have been impacted by COVID, have been impacted by everything we're experiencing now. But there's certainly no return to normal, return to business as usual, where all American students are being set up to thrive equally. And so this sort of mission to uproot inequity is certainly at the heart of New Leaders' work and is core to the work that all of our principals, all of our school leaders that are on this panel today are facing. Just to share a little bit more context, so at New Leaders, we really draw upon a field of research in school improvement that demonstrates that improvement to schools is possible through effective teachers, a strong principal, and a rigorous curriculum. And that, school leaders are really have an outsized impact on all of those things. We have found at times historically, and certainly even in this current moment, that the role of the school leader can often be overlooked, that school leaders are in a unique position to really drive success for their communities, that school leaders are in a unique position to really make or break the success of system level or district level initiatives, policies, and are really in that sort of linchpin role that drives the success of teachers, of faculty, of staff, and ultimately of students and families. And so we are thrilled to have such strong school leaders with us today to really share some insights of what they are experiencing. Again, so much of the conversation that's been happening nationally from our perspective has sat sort of at the district level and also at the level of teachers, the single classroom. What are individual teachers experiencing? And yet we know that the success of those teachers and the success of school level, system level initiatives often truly rests on the principalship. To give you a sense of who is with you here today and who are sort of the alumni of New Leaders, we have trained over 4,000 principals serving in roles across the country. Our New Leaders alum are truly an exceptional group. Our research-based studies have demonstrated that they are achieving outsized gains compared to their peers. They are also far more diverse. We have 70% of our alumni who are people of color, which compared to sort of national statistics, oftentimes 20% is where that number hovers in terms of leaders of color leading their school communities. And our school leader alumni truly have a track record of success of getting outsized gains for their students and their schools. So I am proud to be able to introduce to you 5 of our exceptional alum who are going to really be able to share their experiences with you all today. And so I will turn it over. I'll just be facilitating. And I would love to have Alejandra just kick us off and share just briefly name, school, and something we should know about your school out of the gate.
Perfect. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining our session today. So my name is Alejandra Garcia. I'm currently the principal of Governor's Village STEM Academy in Charlotte, North Carolina. And something that's very special about my school, I have the largest K-8 in the state of North Carolina, overseeing close to 2,000 students.
2,000, amazing. So thank you so much for being here with us today. I'm sure stepping away from a school community of 2,000 kids means that there's a lot always on your plate. Great. Andy, let's go to you next.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Andy Dempster, principal at Maxine Smith STEAM Academy. I'm in my 4th year in my current role, and we are the exact opposite of Alejandra. We are a small little speck of a school here. We serve 375 students, but what makes us pretty special is our diversity. We are a direct reflection of our community, about 40% African American, 40% white, and about a 20% mixed race and Hispanic group of students. And it's a special place to work. And I'm glad to be here with you today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andy. Dara, let's go over to you.
Sure. And of course, my kids come around right when it's my turn to speak. My name is Dara Grinnell, and I'm proudly the elder stateswoman in this group, Cohort 8, New Leaders. I serve back in my hometown now, after beginning my career in Newark, 813 middle schoolers. Like my colleague Andy, very diverse school, particularly economically. 1 in 4 students qualify for free and reduced lunch, and the opposite end of that spectrum is, families with every advantage you could think of, a tutor, help with childcare, everything you could think of. And so I really love the opportunity to close that gap between people that might have more economically, but can still achieve at the same level, even if their families don't have the same resources. So thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for being here. And Myron, please introduce yourself.
Good evening, everyone. Hi, my name is Myron Long. I'm the founder and executive director of the Social Justice School. We are a new school that opened up its doors in the midst of a pandemic and an uprising for social justice. We're a very small school with serving 50 scholar activists in our first year of operation. And we have the majority of our students are virtual, but we do have about 10% of our student population that is actually in-person learning as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And Yusuf, rounding out our panel, please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yusuf Muhammad. I'm the proud principal of the STEAM Academy at Carver. I am New Leaders Cohort 11, New York City. And what's special about my school, we are a full project-based learning school. We are a full Title I school serving the neediest students in the state of Georgia. What's also special is that this year we're in our planning year to open as a P-Tech school next year. That's a Pathways and Technology school. We'll be the only school in the South opening as a P-Tech school. So we're extremely excited about our school moving forward.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, thank you all so much. We are now going to just flip to so that you can see our faces. And Dara, I think you are on presentation mode. I don't know if we can pull you off so that we can see everyone's faces up there. And I love it. Kids are welcome. We are all navigating through this moment. It's a very special year, so I'm glad that we get some extra face time with our kids as well. And I see I'm on presentation mode now. I don't know if, perfect. Okay, so we're all up here now. We're gonna turn it over to a panel discussion for the rest of the 50 minutes. If there are questions from the audience, you can definitely feel free to type in as well. We're gonna start it off. And again, my hope is that this is really an honest conversation, that this gives you an opportunity for those who maybe aren't as close to the school level and as close to our school leaders. It gives you true insight into sort of what is happening from the perspective of being at the helm of a school community. So we're hoping that you're going to hear the good, the bad, the ugly, that you're going to hear the challenges unvarnished, as well as the opportunities, the possibilities, the way that these school leaders are really truly working to reimagine, to reinvent aspects of their school communities to best serve their students. Thanks again to all of our panelists. I know I sat in the principal seat for years, so I know how busy you all are. We're thrilled to have you here. I also recognize stuff happens. So if you have to leave for a moment, understandable, but we're really thrilled to have you all with us. So I'm just gonna start us off really thinking back. Obviously, we're 8 months into managing sort of through the pandemic, through this national crisis. And certainly school leaders have gone above and beyond to really meet all manner of needs for their school communities. And so I'm hoping that you can start us off, for a few of the panelists to start us off, just sharing, what's a highlight for you of something that you've been able to do to support students, families, teaching staff. We know how important the needs of our teaching staff is as well. What are you doing to support your school community? And I'd love to start us off with Yusuf. Can you kick us off?
Sure. I'm glad and honored. So at the STEAM Academy at Carver, we are one of 4 schools that work with a nonprofit organization, Purpose Built Schools of Atlanta. And we partner with Atlanta Public Schools. And so we were able to do things a little bit differently, provide a little bit extra support and flexibility. And first out, at the start of the school year, we dedicated 25 days to teacher planning. Most schools dedicate 2 weeks, maybe 1 week, but we really felt the need to expand teacher planning for virtual instruction in what was coming up in the school year. So we did that. We had to make sure that our teachers were on the same page, and all 4 schools really dug deep to focus on equity work, virtual learning, team building, and all the things necessary to really open the school in this pandemic, in this really awkward, new, different way. We also made sure that our students had the technology support. So we delivered over 1,600 Chromebooks to our students. So all 4 schools are one-to-one, and we provided internet service for our students through Comcast. So we partnered with some organizations to make sure that our students had the technology first and foremost. We were able to initially start off with some students assessments in the first quarter, just to make sure we are able to identify those learning gaps, because we missed out on a lot when school ended around March in the state of Georgia, and our school ends in May. So we missed out on some quality learning time. We also made sure that we supported our students who had some literacy struggles. So we partnered with the Skank Schools Dyslexia Resource Trust to provide extra support around literacy for our students. But a lot of our work really centered around our communities and our families. Like I said, we serve some of the neediest population students in the state of Georgia. So we had to really provide extensive outreach to our school communities. We actually created a new role called community engagement managers. And these are people who are dedicated solely to student and family outreach. So we were able to, one, make sure students had the nutrition and the food that they needed. So we paid special emphasis on an expanded food distribution program that really included regular distribution of breakfast and lunches twice per week. We had home delivery of groceries for more than 200 families. And we did this with partnerships from Urban Recipe and some co-ops that work with our families, including CORE, which provides a lot of support. We also had to expand our support around legal matters. This is something that maybe most schools don't have to do, but for our communities, we had to focus on the stability of our families. Students move in and out of school based on the best rental prices in certain areas. So we partnered with the Atlanta Volunteer Lawyers Foundation to make sure that our parents and our guardians had access to lawyers if they needed that. And we really pushed on providing even rental support. So we have a rental assistance program in partnership with the Atlanta Volunteer Lawyers Foundation to make sure that if parents, if community members were stuck because maybe they were home and they couldn't go to work, that we will provide some rental assistance. So part of our work just this year is really around instruction, but also providing really that community holistic wraparound support for our families and students. Those are some of the things that we did this year.
Thanks so much for sharing that. And I think the point you made at the end, there's just so many sort of services, ways that school leaders, individual schools are really providing for basic needs, foundational needs for their school communities. So thank you for sharing that.
Oh, you're welcome.
Dara, I know when we spoke, you talked a lot about how you were really trying to support your staff, managing and supporting your staff, and sort of, really being able to, manage their own challenges and feel supported through this moment. So I'd love to hear you sort of add on to that.
Yeah, thank you. I think so much of it has been being a learner with them. And so there was a lot that they had to learn in a relatively short amount of time. And the term I hear a lot is that, the spring was emergency teaching, was pandemic teaching, but, our families expected and really needed more coming back in the fall. We really had to pivot and learn quickly. And so a lot of it was me learning with them. A lot of questioning of, what can I take off your plate? What can I possibly do for you instead of you doing it? How can I help you build bridges to do some things together? And, one of the really amazing outcomes is that, and there are silver linings when you look for them, is that, we talk about social emotional learning a lot, but a lot of what I see staff doing for kids are things that we did for them. Screen breaks, things like that, just really thinking about how you're feeling with your day, and being a remote teacher and a remote learner. That idea of making sure empathy is like the core has been, it's a simple thing, but it's been ever present. And we also had some access to local grant money to do that work. So sometimes where somebody could do a presentation for them instead of me, just to hear a different voice. So we took advantage of things like that, where the grants could help them think about, how am I going to use technology in this way to help kids connect socially and emotionally? And we really had to think about that, because we are fully remote and the kids miss each other. And we have to be really conscious of what it means to not just be teaching them the content that matters, of course, but how are we making sure that they feel okay? Because middle schoolers want to be around each other, and we've had to find ways, whether that's an additional guidance counselor that we hired, just to have these spaces to be young people and process how they're feeling. And I just would end with, we talked a lot about student voice too with that. So just like our kids need to have a voice to explain how all of this is making them feel, we've made the same kind of spaces for our adults. And it's amazing how much there are parallels. So it's really just been the modeling.
100%. I love that point. Myron, I'd love to hear from you here as well. When we spoke, you talked a lot about sort of really understanding the distinct needs of some of the different demographics within your school community, and sort of how you were really working to meet all needs, and even thinking sort of in terms of your budget and aligning resources to drive equity. So I'd love to hear a little bit more from you.
Definitely. So when we launched the school year, we had 3 priorities. We want our students to be known, loved, and academically challenged. And so we knew that we had to create space for them to connect. And so for our students, what that looked like is that we provided outdoor socially distant meetup opportunities for our students in each different ward in DC, because our students come from each of the wards in DC. And that was just an opportunity for parents and students and teachers to connect, and to there's point just to be middle schoolers and just being able to connect and see each other. And we got a lot of positive feedback from our school community and the local charter and public school sector, just about our willingness to create those conditions for community, even though we're mostly online. I think the second piece, we really wanted our students and families to feel deeply connected and to see the school as a resource. And so as a very small school, we had to make some pretty mission-aligned decisions with our budget to make sure that we could provide opportunities for groceries for our families, for rental assistance for our families as well, just because we really know that that's what it means to be crew, which is, what we say at our school, we're crew, not passengers. And then I think, lastly, for us, it's just about, creating space for students and families to also connect online. So we did a variety of different community game nights. Karaoke is always a hit online as well, just so that our students can still feel a deep sense of connection and belonging to our school.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So I want to shift gears a little bit and just sort of building off of that last piece around really recognizing and addressing the way that you all have experienced sort of increasing or deepening inequity play out within the cities in which you work, within the school systems in which you operate. I want to give you an opportunity to just share a little bit more about sort of, how you've experienced those deepening inequities and how you, as school leaders, have really sought to drive equity in your systems, so that all of your students, particularly those who are most persistently marginalized, are really centered and are really given the tools to do their best and achieve their potential. So Andy, I would love to start with you and hear a little bit about how you're thinking about all of that.
Hey, yeah, that's a tough one, and given the current circumstances, that when you're in school and you talk about equity practices and equal practices and distributing the work and loads and how to do that, it all shifted. I think our first day at school, when kids weren't in your classroom in uniform, you're in their living room. You're in their bedroom in some cases. Some are in your bathroom, and then some have a perfect, tidy, their own personal office. And so when you see that on one screen, it really opened my eyes to what equity really means to me. And so we started the year off with this idea of, we're all learning. Let's give each other grace. Let's give teachers grace. Let's give students and parents and families grace. Everybody's nervous. Everybody's scared. Everybody has anxieties. Nobody knows how to fix it. And so we've really battled with that. So we've learned a lot in technology and delivering quality instruction. Our priority is always academic achievement and growth. Our second priority is always our Knights Care culture. But I feel when given these circumstances, and that culture has almost trumped academic in a lot of ways this year, because of equity and because we get to see each other in these different lights. Even though it's via a screen, we almost are getting to know each other a little better. And so when I think of equity, I think of the work that we're doing around identity and our stories and ourselves, and the time and effort that we're working with an organization facing history and ourselves. And we are pouring into our students to have a story, to have an identity, to know that that's important. And so they have those tools to express themselves in that. I think of the idea of grace and how it started as, let's be understanding and let's train and let's give information and access and opportunity. And now the conversation is, how do we give grace while holding accountable? Because at one point, grace turned into low expectations. And we've been battling that discussion when it comes to student work and the quality and expectation of student work, and even the expectation of how we are treating each other in virtual spaces. So I don't have any answers, but I know that those are the discussions and problems that we're continuing to discuss in our leadership teams and even with our community meetings.
Yeah, appreciate that. And I think something that's interesting that you touched on is, I think there's been in some sectors, a growing narrative that without students in person every day, that some of these inequities, some of the challenges that our kids are facing become more hidden, more, behind doors, out of view. And yet, I think if we're really watching and noticing, we're actually learning a lot and engaging with our families and our kids in a very different way during this time, in which in some ways those inequities are more in plain sight than perhaps they've been in the past.
Yeah, when you see the brothers and sisters fighting in the background and the computer go flying and knock somebody upside the head, it really brings in perspective what some of our families and some of our students are fighting through just to learn and to engage. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Alejandro, I'd love for you to follow up and just, and you're in such a large school community, 2,000 kids. How are you just sort of wrapping your head around the varying needs of your community, and how are you really trying to keep equity front and center?
So, and I actually need to add that both of my schools are Title I as well. So it's been extremely interesting. And I think through all this, I've had the experience of seeing the deepening of inequalities because I've had to reshift my entire instructional leadership team to shift on the bigger goals, which is truly trying to find my students, right? So academics is always our number one, but like I think Andy said, this year it became more like a culture, or where are they? Or how do we provide more social emotional support? So we all became counselors, we all became social workers, we all became nurses, we all became anything that we need to become in order to find them. So that's been a huge shift in training everybody. We have social emotional learning every morning remotely. For the ones that are at home, I do have half of students on campus, half at home, just to see how they're doing. You know, we have counselors jumping into Zoom just to see, hey, where are they at? What place are they sitting at? Do you think we need resources if they can't reach out? So our main goal is pretty much to try to find them and to provide them with survival resources, which is totally different from other schools in my county, which have no issues with survival, right? So how do you survive? Do you have food? Do you need a device? Do you need a hotspot? Do you need me to come home? Do you need me to drop off? We have like meal bundles for the week. Here are your 5 bundles for the week, because I know you're home alone and I know you're watching the little ones too. So it's okay, we're here for you. We're actually in the works of creating a survival communication response like tree for kids. So what do you do if this happens? Call this teacher. What do you do if this happens? Call this person in school. So we are navigating all those inequities and making major shifts just to try to support our kids socially and emotionally so I don't lose them. Is pretty much where we're at right now.
And I think what is certainly not surprising to me at this point, but is sort of phenomenal, is the way that school leaders like yourselves and others are really filling such a critical, like national, in some cases, state level leadership gap. And just, you know, the fact that an individual school is responsible for sort of survival of their students is, I think, a phenomenal statement, right? And so much is resting on your shoulders. So thank you for that. Anyone else want to sort of just share anything resonating with you on this question before we move on to our next one?
I think I would just add, it's so interesting too, the different things that you're searching to fill the gaps in. So it's those survival items, right? You know, your basic Maslow needs of feeling safe and fed and secure. And then knowing that, you know, our job is to educate, and that if our eye is not on the ball, then the gap will widen. And so also hunting down, you know, knowing that people are just like building fabulous home libraries while other, you know, kids do not. So how do we get those kinds of materials out to our kids too, and not make we're delivering. I think all of us have, you know, my kids would laugh. I was like the Chromebook lady, but you know, you're just delivering things, because it can't be that because you can't get to the school, those items are not in your family's hands. So much of it is the survival pieces, but also those academic things that other families are just choosing to go ahead and purchase, that you have a strong percentage of your families that can't.
Absolutely.
And just to add on to what Andy talked about around equity, one of our biggest issues starting out the school year was around whether the video should be on or not on laptops. And some teachers really wanted students to be engaged by having that video on, but not understanding that there may be some things in the background that students may be ashamed of, right? So just to be conscious and aware that not every household is the same. So building relationships and finding ways to engage students, even if they may not want to show what's happening in the background of their home. That was a huge conversation. It's something that we're continuously working on.
I'd also just add that we don't often think about a sense of belonging as a place where equity gaps can widen. And I think that we've seen that there are some families at our school who really see the school as like a place for them to create community and connections. And so we, intentionally sought out those students, have done many different home visits just to connect with those students on a deeper personal level, so that that sense of belonging and connectedness to our school community is there as well.
Absolutely. And I think you're also making me think, just as school leaders start to turn their attention to sort of, what does post-pandemic schooling look like? What does next year look like? I think from everything we're seeing, reinforcing those connections to school in the new year making sure that students feel seen, part of a learning community that is supportive, in which their hopes and aspirations are reflected, that they haven't sort of seen those deteriorate over time, I think is going to be in some ways just as important as accelerating student learning and ensuring that we're sort of, catching up, making up for lost time. I do want to shift a little bit. We've been talking a lot about the challenges and the sort of gravely serious issues that we face. But I'm also curious to hear from you, when you think about some of the changes that you've made this year, either out of necessity or sort of just finding ways to be inventive, finding ways to reimagine. What are the things that you're thinking of that you actually, that you found to be successful and that you're planning to continue, once the pandemic is over, once we've ridden the wave of what we're currently experiencing? And I think anyone can start. I would love to hear from Dara. Why don't you start us off?
We've definitely thought about, for community events, making more of them virtual or having the opportunity for them to be both. So whether that is, having a guest speaker or an informational event, there are people that, can easily access and get information from their phone, but can't always physically get to the school in the evening when a lot of the events are, even on Saturdays, even when we were thinking of different times of the day. The reality is it's about the physical getting there that is keeping some families back. So we definitely have seen more family engagement for certain events and outreach activities from them being able to just remote in. And then, it's also about just the opportunities for guest speakers to come in and engage kids. And, I've started this series, Representation Matters, where we've had our graduates, primarily graduates of color, just come and remote in and speak to the kids. And, they couldn't necessarily do that, but while school is remote, they can. We have one on Thursday. And, we wouldn't have thought to kind of think outside the box in that way. Everything kind of felt like it needed to be an assembly. And then professional development. Again, there's a lot that we are learning in this venue, whether it's how to go about teaching something, how we deliver professional development for our teachers. I did a lot of that with new leaders over the summer. Really don't know how I would have managed this year without all my new leaders' time. And so professional development has looked different, and the engagement in professional development has been, because it's more convenient for staff, their engagement has been better. So I see all of those as just great things. Again, silver lining, despite all the challenges.
I love that. And I think, it's so real, the sort of the challenges that staff are facing, the challenges we all are facing. And yet, as much as I think we're all struggling with sustainability, there are real bright spots. And so it's great to hear that you'll be able to continue some of that as we continue on.
Hey, Michelle, I want to add
Andy,
on to that.
Go for it, please.
There are a ton of great practices coming out of this that I agree with Daryl on, that you have to continue. And we all know, as new leaders, DDI. And if you're not living your data-driven instructional cycle and identifying those gaps and bridging those gaps, when I was in New Leaders 2012, we used to do this on like a 6-week cycle. This thing has to live almost day by day now. You are constantly seeking and planning for and anticipating learning gaps before we are delivering high quality instruction. And we're analyzing student work and student data, preparing and bridging those gaps the next day. So something that's come out of this pandemic are our data-driven systems can we, one, trust our data? Is the student work valid and reliable in this virtual space? If so, what do we do? If not, how do we still continue the cycle in collecting more student learning outcome data? So that's one thing that I would say we've strengthened in this virtual space out of necessity, because we've tried to identify the gaps that were lost at the end of last year, and then are still trying to keep up with what we're delivering this year. I think that's a big celebration point. I want to also say a big gap in my learning that I've learned on is I had a guidance counselor meeting at the beginning of every single year, and I signed off on the program. This is the guidance program. It was month 1, study skills, month 2, character education, month 3, something else. And the level of specificity that we are delivering social and emotional learning experiences to kids right now is extraordinary. Going along with, I think Alejandra said it, like we do a daily morning meeting. I have hired an outside child psychologist to teach our kids different mindful practices to how to cope with anxiety, how coping with depression. When I went to my district and said, hey, school psychologist, I need help programming this stuff, they said, well, I only do testing. Well, then I went to our district social workers and said, hey, I need help, servicing students in a programming fashion for our school. Well, we don't do that. We just provide services to individuals. And so there's this huge gap in who's developing these social emotional programs and experiences for kids on a regular basis where they can actually apply it in their own lives. And so a big positive and celebration point coming out of this for us is that we've put a microscope on that work, and that will have to continue in the years to come.
Yeah. All of a sudden, they became our best friends. I was like you, Andy, like, oh, counselors, okay, yes, your office is like down the hallway. Come to me every 6 months, I have to confess, and I am like focused on math data, reading data, science data. Like, they'll come now. It's like I moved their space in my conference room, so we're like all together every day designing lessons. Like today, in response to the student survey, they're saying they're having issues with depression, with advocacy. We are creating lessons together so we could deliver them during SEL, which is social emotional learning. But I do have to add to that too, that we now have like Zoom study hall. So teachers are like hanging out after school from like 4:15 to 6:15, just seeing if the students could hang out, but we're really trying to figure out how they're doing at home and kind of like watching them. We know they're home alone, but how can we support them during that as we're teaching them? And we also have strengthened our personalized learning for teachers. Now it's not like, I think Dara also said staff meetings are like virtual, and creating playlists for teachers. So it's not like go to this PD, go to this PD. It's more like, here is a list of the professional development sessions that I think you should attend based on your need, and pace yourself to complete them by next month. Not like, oh, I have to be out this whole entire day because I have to go to 7 sessions this month. So we've learned how to strengthen our technology and personalized learning for adults as well.
Yeah.
I would just add to a quick suggestion I got from one of the new leader sessions I went to over the summer, 180 days of self-care, but for busy educators. I really liked it, and you have to be thoughtful about it because you don't want to say you're stressed out and I'll take care of yourself. But it really has been helpful. And, we are busy principals. So it's for all their hopes and dreams. That's not something that is really being considered for principals, the SEL. We kind of have to do that for ourselves. But, it's important for us to be thinking about it for teachers. So for me, it was so helpful to have a resource. And I picked the ones that I know will not vibe with my staff. Like that's just not working for my crew. But we did do stuff like playlists and, just add levity. And then I watched them do it with their kids. So it's so helpful to kind of go to some targeted professional development for yourself that you can then turn around and use for your staff.
And I'll just quickly add that, during the transition, we learned that the kids adjusted much faster than the adults. Right. Before the pandemic, we had a teacher who was getting her master's in instructional technology, and she was able to provide a lot of just professional development for our staff around all these things you can do. But when it came time to shift, the teachers really struggled with the technology and all the various options. The kids, they jump right on it. It's second nature to them. So what does that tell us about 21st century learning and the new student? So thinking of what we've learned from this, there's a space maybe where we can continue some virtual learning when we come back face to face for certain students. So differentiation is really key. And I know that Alejandra mentioned that really personalization and really focusing in on how do we just create culture online, right? How do we have games and fun activities and also just emphasize learning and differentiation through this space? I think we learned a lot, and I think we're going to come back a different way, but also really focusing on how important it is to put families first, communities first, and students first. Instruction is big. It's our foundation, but we can't get anything done if we don't prioritize those really important needs. So a lot of lessons learned.
And I just add that we, when we think about wellness for staff, we primarily think about our teachers. And sometimes we don't forget about our principals and instructional leaders. And so we hired a wellness expert to develop wellness goals and a wellness plan for our leadership team, just to make sure that we're also taking care of ourselves. Because, as you all know, being a school leader, you absorb the emotions of your school and you carry that weight pretty heavily. And so thinking about opportunities for our wellness team to support our leadership team was really important for us. And then I would say second, we developed I would say like a virtual command center, and essentially it's like our rapid communication, right? So like anytime we see a student not in class, it's like an immediate phone call, or for students not engaged, it's like an immediate phone call versus like, sometimes you might send a robocall at the end of the day or wait till like the end of the class period. And we found that, that kind of rapid communication to our families has contributed to our attendance and engagement levels being pretty high for during this time. So we definitely will continue that as well.
I love that. So thanks all for sort of reflecting on, where we've been, challenges and opportunities. And I want to spend the last part just shifting a little bit and thinking about both, from your seat and knowing that here in our audience today, we have folks who are at the system level, right? Superintendents of districts. We may have folks that are community members. We may have folks that are doing state level policy work. When you think about the support that your school communities need to be successful, what does that look like for you? How are you thinking about the needs of your school communities, not just in this moment, what you need tomorrow, but what you're going to need to ultimately set your school communities up for success in the long term? And, what would you want policymakers? What would you want state or federal leaders? What would you want school superintendents to know about your needs and the needs of your school and your students so that you can really set your team up for success? And happy to start with anyone.
I think what first comes to mind for me is that we have this really unique moment in our history to rethink what school accountability looks like. And I say that in the context of, there is a significant amount of research that shows the correlation between at-risk and absolute achievement. And if we continue to only look at school performance through the lens of absolute achievement, then we're actually doing a pretty disservice to our school communities. And we need to think about an opportunity to look at growth and put a particular significant weight on the amount of growth that our students are gaining in their school years. Because I think the way that most accountability systems and frameworks are set up is that they're actually really assessing whether or not schools can maintain the performance of those who are already academically achieving, right? Like most accountability systems don't technically look at student growth at the same amount of weight as absolute achievement. And we have this opportunity to change that. We also have this opportunity to really think through multiple measures of student success. And so if we know, for example, right now that this need for community, this need for belonging is pretty significant, then we should think about how we can put pressure on our policymakers to rethink accountability systems that really do focus on belonging and mission aligned accountability as well. For a school like social justice, simply looking at a student's test performance does not demonstrate whether or not our mission is true for our scholar activists and their families, right? And so I think, those are some of the recommendations that I have for folks listening, and it returns to us having the opportunity to rethink what school accountability could look like.
I also think it's about, not losing the moment, whether for your state or district or local entity, the horrific moment with George Floyd. And, I think about my staff meetings that they had at that time. And I think it's just so important to really define what, in your state, what does it mean to affirm that Black Lives Matter at school, and what is policy behind that? So what Myron is saying speaks volumes to me. especially because we know that a lot of the accountability systems harm Black students. And I also think, it's just the thing, like we talk about these issues in my school district all the time. There's formal, issues and challenges and Office of Civil Rights complaints that speak to this. So it's, the eye is on the ball for this work in our school district all the time. But what's the policy that really says, you have to do this? Because that does help principals. Not just this is important to me and this matters. This is the policy. This is what is in our documents. And if this isn't something that you believe is valid as a teacher or, as a whatever your role is in the school, then it's not okay, because then you're doing harm. So I really think, no one has definitive answers. Some people do, I'm sure. Some of it has to do with, blurring lines and combining school districts. If you look at, Nicole Hannah-Jones's work. But I think it's about really getting the right people together in the now to really look at policy around Black Lives Matter at school. We know what those 10 to 12 demands are, but what does that look like for them to become codified in our states?
Yeah. And to add to that, part of our vision is to empower our students to become change agents who create positive, long-lasting impact in their communities. Not just to go to school and go to another community and improve that community, but to become educated and to improve your communities to make it better. And we can't do that without a shift in the importance of African and African American studies in schools, so kids can really get in-depth knowledge of where they're from, the contributions, and the struggles. And there's so much inspiration in that work and in that field. So really putting more emphasis on education systems and curriculums that really reflect the students who are in the classroom. And with my school, our focus is project-based learning. Our students learn differently. We don't have a traditional school where teachers are at the front and students listen. Those students are engaged, they're working together, they're learning communication skills, and they're doing projects that align to their communities and improving their communities. So you can learn standards and you can become successful when the learning is personalized and it's connected to your own world, and you have this emphasis to improve your world through education. Education has to be meaningful, and it can't be just, we're learning to take a test, and if we take this test, we move forward. No, how do you change your communities? How do you improve your communities? And how do you build the ability to communicate with each other, to learn hands-on skills, to learn professional skills in that space? We had a student 2 weeks ago who was unfortunately murdered, and his name was DeMarcus. And I like to tell his story because he was a student who was in a special education class, and he was brilliant, but he didn't fit the necessary class model. What he liked to do was draw on art, on sneakers, and he created these fabulous just sneakers with these great artwork. And I wondered, what could we have done better as a school community, as a society, to really allow his talent to flourish? And sometimes you don't see that in a traditional model. So we're holding on to project-based learning, and we really want to ask people to really focus in on the importance of that and how it impacts our kids and make learning more meaningful. So project-based learning and ways to just shift the thinking around what's important and what's, a big priority. I think putting students first is what we really need to do.
And even just what student voice looks like, Yusuf, that's what I think about, right? So I would imagine part of what those projects are is getting to talk about it, to have audience with people who might implement their ideas. And you never see any middle schooler as excited as when you have listened to what they asked you to do in the school community. And we're doing that virtually. That's what we're doing on Friday. Like, this is our upcoming convocation. We're checking in on the first marking period. What changes do you need? You tell me for this moment. And the student voice is fundamental.
Yeah, that's actually our culminating activity. The students present their projects to the community, to stakeholders, to parents and families, and wow, it's an amazing sight.
Awesome. Andy, Alejandra, any additional thoughts on this? Sort of what you'd like the world to know about your needs of your school community? Oh, Alejandra, I think you're still on mute.
I said I was also thinking, I think what Yusuf said was about his student, one that would be able to draw on the sneakers and what bright future he might have had. I think if policymakers would give sometimes us as educators and principals the autonomy to do what's right for our school, as opposed to housing us in these buckets that they think will fit the middle of the national student body, is what I'm always saying. It would help us a lot too. And also understanding the true role of the educators, because I don't think there's any other profession right now that's having to lead schools, lead students, teach students at the same time that you're having to teach your own kids at home. Be a parent, be a family, be a member, be a mom, be a principal, be an educator. Like, at what point do policymakers truly understand our roles as educators nationally? So no other profession right now that's working remotely has to be dealing with, I have 3 of my own, right? Like, has to be teaching my 3 as I'm teaching the 2,000 and educating the 153 teachers. So it's just understanding truly our role. And this is like a great opportunity for the nation to actually take us up to another level when it comes to respecting educators in this country, is what I'm thinking. Like, all of us are counselors, nurses, everybody. At the same time as we're parents, we can't go work for corporate America and then do that work remotely and come back home. No, we have to do it all together, the same jobs, like at the same time.
I'm rooting for Jamal Bowman, Congressman-elect, New Leaders Cohort 8. I believe he is going to have our voice on Capitol Hill. So a little plug for my cohort mate.
Awesome. And Andy, any final thoughts for us on this question?
Yes, I'm just inspired just by my colleagues here and grateful to be on this table. I think when I think of policy and that 90,000 foot view, I just like, I think you started us off when you said leadership matters, and like when it matters not just on a principal level, but also on district levels and in that regard. So I just think that we just need to continue to vote. I think I want to echo Dara and Alejandra in saying, how do we mandate student voice? Like, how is that a policy? How do we mandate community voice? And what systems can be put in place to ensure that those voices have a place and that are heard by our leaders? Because there's got to be a system for that somehow. And right now we're having to create it and seek it and go get it. And it's almost a burden. So I would say if there's a policy person in the room that can start a discussion around district level, school level, parent voice, student voice, has to be a part of the decision-making process. So.
Thanks so much for that. So we're just in our final few minutes here. I do see one question. So I think let's take our one question from Olivia, which is around, how do you support educators in learning new ed tech tools? I'm thinking, Yusuf, about what you said about the kids in some ways we're faster at adopting new technology than sometimes our staff are. So I'd love to hear from you, what work have you all been doing to really support teachers and getting up to speed on new tech?
I think I could add to that, Olivia. I had a model for them, like Canvas. I had to create an all Canvas course myself. Mm-hmm. So the teacher would then understand you all have to have a Canvas course, and this is the skeleton of it. And then doing like tons of screencastify, which is me videoing, doing exactly step by step of what is needed in order for them to be like, oh, so this is what she wants from me. But it's been tons and tons of modeling and me having to learn all of the different platforms. I even have to log in as a student sometimes to be like, okay, so what is the student piece of this? So I could then support the teacher in understanding this platform, because we have tons of platforms out there.
Yeah. I've learned not to assume that teachers got it the first round, right? And so you have to constantly go back and back. And then you have teachers who are in different places. And one success that we've had is having some of our younger teachers who are more adept to technology really do the work. They speak the language and run a lot of the professional development for the older teachers. But it really is about just over and over again and getting teachers into the space and doing it. And the kind of that failure is feedback model that we do at New Leaders, that you learn through failure. We had to do a lot of that over the summer. So I'm glad we had 25 days to still dig in. And we're still learning, and it's ongoing. So one thing it has done is really just emphasize the importance of having a learning culture. That we're constantly learning, our students are learning, and adults are learning. But it's not easy.
You have to connect that to student voice. Some teachers by necessity realize, what, the student needs to kind of help you with that. But I praise them for it. I would watch them in a virtual class and they were having trouble, and the kids just proudly, oh, just do this, da 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 da, or oh, my other teacher did this. So it was this opportunity for a more shared classroom than some teachers were in person comfortable doing, but like, hey, I don't understand what is going on in this platform, and the student does. So you have to make those spaces for each other, but there's nothing wrong with them learning from a student too. Like, what an opportunity for the kids to be proud of what they're learning or showcasing during these times.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, thanks, everyone. In our last couple of minutes, I'll just bring us all back together, and want to really thank all 5 of you for your thoughtfulness and the insights that you shared today, and for taking the time out of managing incredibly complex schedules and workloads to be able to be here today. Myron brought us to sort of really thinking about how we're generating feelings of belonging and community among our students, and your crew, not passengers, is definitely going to stick with me. Dara, I really appreciated you talking about sort of the way that you've been really intentional about modeling for your teachers, both the type of community and the type of learning practices you want to see them implement with students, and just the level of thoughtfulness there. Andy, I really appreciated what you said about, the challenge of not letting the grace and the understanding that we're giving to students and families to this time turn into low expectations, that through it all, we've got to keep sort of high expectations front and center for our school communities. Alejandra, I think just the way you've organized your leadership team around sort of, what does it look like to organize our entire team around survival of our kids, so that we come out of this arm in arm on the other end. And Yusuf, I love that last point you made just around, that learning culture has got to be not only for the students, but something that we embrace as adults and as school leaders. So thank you all for your time, and I'll just reinforce to our audience, I think the ways that you are working to truly move mountains for your school communities cannot happen without powerful leaders like you at the helm of schools. We're putting so much of the success of what happens for students on the shoulders of our school leaders. And so for me, it just reinforces how critically important it is to have a school leader in that seat who can really organize their school around the needs of kids, who can really ensure that student voice is taken care of, and can really ensure that the needs of their community are being met. So thank you all again. I know we're right at time, and appreciative of everyone's time today. I hope that our participants were able to take away some meaningful insights.